Hiya, friends and neighbors. The other day in the comments section of this YouTube channel, someone asked me if I would do a video about how to do Zazen, and I thought, my teacher Nishijima Roshi already did a video about how to do Zazen, and I'll leave a link to that below so you can click on it and look. And YouTube is kind of full of videos of people showing you how to do Zazen. I haven't watched all of them, but I've seen a handful of them, and the ones I've seen are all fairly good because Zazen is very simple. You can teach somebody how to do Zazen in just a couple of minutes, right? But what I'd like to talk to you about instead of that, kind of inspired by that request, is why bad Zazen is really the best kind of Zazen. Because one of the most frequently asked questions I get, and I've talked about this on this channel before, I'm sure, is this and that and the other thing are happening during my Zazen, usually mental things. Am I doing it wrong, or how can I do it right? A lot of people will do Zazen for a time and they'll start saying, well, I'm not making progress in my Zazen. I'm not moving forward. It's not doing what I want. This is the best thing that can possibly happen to you in Zazen, is to have that thought of, this is not the kind of Zazen I want, and I'll tell you why. It's because at that moment you are coming up against what you think you ought to have and how you think things ought to be and how they really are. And a lot of our problems as human beings stem from this inability to just accept things as they are. The reason I think that we have such trouble accepting things as they are is because our not accepting things the way they are has been probably also the root of our greatest success as an animal species on planet Earth. I think it's probably the only reason we have survived as an animal species on planet Earth, because we really don't have much else going for us. If we're on the African savanna a million years ago, we don't have any claws, we don't have any big teeth, we don't have much that we can use in order to just not be eaten by bigger, stronger animals. But we do have this ability to think things through and go, well, this situation isn't what I really wanted. The saber-toothed tiger or the triceratops can come along and eat me. But if I change the situation, maybe it'll be more like what I wanted. And we've gone from, inventing, spears and little, those little knives that they make by breaking the rocks against the other rocks and all this stuff you learn about in science class, to what you've got now. You're watching me on a computer screen. This is also the fruit of somebody saying, well, this isn't what I wanted, but maybe we can improve that. Well, so that's great. It's not something we ever want to give up or lose, but it also becomes a barrier to us in a more sort of spiritual fashion, in a more existential fashion, because we always want something different from whatever it is we have. Zazen forces you to sit with exactly what you have, exactly the mind you have at this moment, exactly the body you have at this moment, exactly the situation you have at this moment, and it forces you to just be with it. So if you're sitting in Zazen, kind of comparing your Zazen experience to what you think it should be, something you read in some cheesy book or you saw in some cheesy show that has a Zen master who's played by an actor who has no idea about Zen, whose lines were written by a writer who has no idea about Zen, and you're comparing your Zazen to that, well, of course it's going to come up short. A better strategy is to just stay with exactly what you have right now, right this minute, and live with that. One of the ways I tried to explain this in one of my books, maybe Hardcore Zen, I'm not sure, was a story that's kind of hard to explain, but now I can do it with visuals, so maybe it'll make it easier to explain. I come from Akron, Ohio, Northeast Ohio. Other than the years in my childhood when I lived in Nairobi, Kenya, I mostly grew up in Northeast Ohio. And one of the most important sort of people in Northeast Ohio history is Gilardi. Gilardi was a character played by a guy named Ernie Anderson, and he did this show in the early 60s, really before my time, where he played this kind of goofy character who would come on late night and introduce horror movies and say funny things.
Ernie Anderson here. We'd like tonight to interview probably one of the most outstanding personalities in the Cleveland area and maybe of our time, Gilardi. Oh. And I'm sure it's going to be a lot of laughs tonight.
And it really meant a lot to a lot of people in that area where I grew up. Even to people like me who were too young to actually have seen the show, because it would get, referenced and traded around the very few pieces of video that still existed. So it meant a lot. And then there was Ron Swede, who I talked about, who carried on for Gilardi and did another sort of version of Gilardi called The Ghoul. There's an interview with Ernie Anderson late in life, and he's already quit being Gilardi. He moved to the West Coast here in Los Angeles, and he became the top paid voice announcer for, a decade or so. His voice was everywhere.
Saturday, the Love Boat just might sink.
That's entertainment.
It's a Titanic 2-hour spectacular.
On the next episode of Star Trek, The Next Generation, a tragic accident exposes the crew to a savage alien race.
So here he is later in life, and all this stuff has happened. He's become a big success, and he's a millionaire. And he is the father of Paul Thomas Anderson, who would go on to become a great director. And he's asked, is there anything that you haven't done that you would like to do in your life? And he kind of thinks about it for a second, and he says, one of the things I always wished I would be able to do is, since I came out to Hollywood, I would take these little bit parts in movies, and I always wished I would get cast in a bit part that somebody would remember. People would remember. Maybe I wasn't the star of the movie, but people would remember years later. They would see that movie and go, "Oh, that guy, that was a really interesting part that guy played." And then he said, "Well, I never got to do it, and I'm old now. Maybe I'll get to do it one of these days, but probably not, and that's my big regret." And the thing was, when I saw that interview, I thought, you did that. You were Gilardi, and it meant a lot to a lot of people. And yeah, it was a small part because, only people in Northeast Ohio ever saw it, and it was only on for like 3.5 years. So it wasn't really, in the overall scheme of things, a starring role, but it was a small part that a lot of people really remember. The thing is, he wanted his small part that everybody remembers to be a certain kind of thing, and he couldn't recognize that he already did that. When I saw that, that sparked something in me, and I started looking at my own life and going, oh yeah, this life that I'm complaining about, these situations that I'm complaining about, this is kind of really exactly what I wanted, except maybe not in exactly the same way. It's really, just like Ernie Anderson, I am missing out on the fact that this is kind of what I wanted. This is kind of my ideal situation, even though maybe it doesn't always seem so. Now, of course, there are things that you got to improve in your life. And of course, some people get into really bad situations that they better get out of, and you really want to do something about that and take some action. But even that, you won't be able to take the proper action until you recognize and accept what's actually going on right now. So, therefore, Zazen, when it is not what you want it to be, is exactly what you want it to be. So there's my little message for the day. Hope you enjoyed that. Remember that I am supported by your PayPal and Patreon donations. Book royalties don't cut it. Speaking fees don't cut it. But what I really make my living on is donations from you guys. And I appreciate it very much. I appreciate that you still keep on supporting me. Thank you, and we'll see you next time. Bye.